All right, welcome everyone. In the interest of staying on time, we're going to go ahead and kick the meeting off. So we're excited to have this special webinar on strategies for supporting the adoption of radiation reducing building codes. My name is Lisa Brudigan, and I'm the current Executive Director for the Conference of Radiation Control Program Directors. We are excited to welcome over 97 participants today as we focus on strengthening state and tribal radon programs' knowledge of understanding radon reducing new construction techniques and the International Residential Codes, Appendix A, AF, BE, radon control methods in new construction. This session will include ideas and real-world examples for outreach and education with code officials to support adoption of radon building codes, along with resources that you can use to support these efforts. We're thrilled to be joined by leading experts from across the country representing EPA, state health agencies, and labor and industry programs. We have a full agenda, but we're going to aim to keep our speakers on time so that we can hear from everyone. We do ask that you write your questions down and save them to the end of the meeting or submit them in the chat throughout the webinar. And the slide does not want to advance. All right, well, the next one is the agenda, which hopefully you were able to see that copy. But up first, we're going to kick off our meeting with Tommy Bowles. He's our EPA Radon team lead. Then we'll be followed by Josh Kerber, who's a research scientist with the Minnesota Department of Health. Up after that will be Jane Malone, our National Policy Director with the Indoor Environments Association. Then I believe we have Philip Gibson, our Radon Program Coordinator for the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. We do have a substitute. Jason was not able to join us today, but Mark Ungerer with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment is joining us. And then we're going to round up before we have question and answers at the end with Don Savigny, also with the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. All right, Tommy, are you on the call and ready to go? Is anyone able to hear me out there?
I can hear you.
All right. Let's look at the chat and see if Tommy has joined us yet.
I don't see his initials in the lineup.
Okay. All right. Josh, are you able to go ahead and get started with your portion?
Yeah, I can.
All right. Thank you.
All right. I've been tasked to talk to you guys a little bit about the nuts and bolts of radon-resistant new construction, and hopefully Mr. Bowles can join us afterwards and give his EPA's talking points. There's a lot of state and tribal turnover in staff at radiation and radon programs, so I wanted to kind of bring everybody up to kind of a minimal level of knowledge here as we continue down this path. Our stance is that all new homes should be built radon resistant. And there are a handful of different radon codes out there, but they're all very similar. You will have the radon resistant new construction appendix in the IRC, which Jane Malone will talk about. You also have certain state requirements or even national standards, but they're all basically the same. And if we boil them all down, they're shown here on this image. There are two types of approaches, though. There's one called passive radon resistant new construction. That means there's no radon fan used in this approach. And then there's an active or an activated radon system, either from the get-go without testing for radon or testing and then adding it later. But from the ground up, you start with a layer of aggregate, usually 4 to 6 inches thick, and that's clean gravel fill. So it creates an air void and a place for the concrete slab to rest. In that aggregate, there's a vent T-pipe connected to a 3 or 4 inch vent riser, which then goes up through the roof. This shows a basement and a crawl space combination foundation. The same could be held true if this was just a slab on grade foundation too. the pieces and parts are all the same. In crawl spaces that are not poured concrete, it's just a membrane. The membrane needs to be sealed to the outer edges, and you still have the T-pipe buried underneath that, which then can passively draw soil gas up and vent it outside. One of the main things is sealing does need to be done. And the main point to sealing is this floor wall joint here in the basement or slab on grade approach. And then the soil gas retarder also being sealed to the edges of the crawl space, the piers, and the vent pipe itself. From the vent pipe up through the roof, obviously you want to flash it for precipitation, rain one-off, snow melt, whatever you have, but then also have an electrical box, circuit termination, whatever you want to call it, near where the fan would go. So you want to have this electrical box within, say, 4 to 6 feet of this radon pipe, so the fan can be added in either location here, and then electrified by plugging it in. Passive systems in our research and our experience gives about a 40 to 50% reduction in radon indoors. And this is both from literature reviews as well as our own internal research, which I'll touch on. Now, when we activate these systems, we see a far higher reduction, 90%, actually probably closer to like 97% reduction in the indoor radon levels. When we're talking about aggregate under the slab, as you can see, this is a clean gravel fill, and there's specs for this type of gravel. Now, if you're in areas where you don't have a lot of gravel, or you're in a dry, arid climate like Colorado, as an example, you may not have gravel fill. You may actually have sand overlaid by geotextile matting, which is roughly 1.5 to 3 inches thick, like a pillow you would put over the top of the dirt and then pour the foundation on top of that. You also want to make sure that the air void that you're creating under the slab is continuous from this foundation zone to the next foundation zone to the next one. So if you're drawing air from anywhere, you're going to make the connection from point A to point B. One way that we do it here in Minnesota is that we have footing sleeves. These are 4-inch perforated PVC pipe that connects this foundation zone with this one. Likewise, we have one on this side connecting the outside foundation zone with actually the inside foundation zone. On top of that clean gravel fill, we put a vent pipe or a soil gas retarder. It's probably a misnomer of the soil gas retarder because when it is installed, there aren't actually big, strong requirements in the standard or the field experience really show us that it's necessary to have it airtight. So it's not really a soil gas retarder because it's not keeping the soil gas from moving into the building. But what it is doing is a much more important role. And it's keeping the concrete, the slab pour above our clean gravel fill. So it's really a concrete retarder if you want to get to the nuts and bolts of it. But what that it does is it keeps the concrete from filling our gravel bed. And that does two things for us. One, it gives us the soil gas collection plenum beneath the slab. But two, it creates for drier environments because we have a capillary break. So the soil that's wet underneath the house, that wetness doesn't migrate through the concrete and into the house. Crawl space membranes do need to be sealed to the outside walls and inside piers, but we don't see a whole lot of them in Minnesota. But other states, obviously, you would see these quite often. The reason we don't see a ton of crawl spaces here is because we got to dig so deep to get below the frost line that we just hollow it out and call it a basement. Now, the most important piece to all of this, if you want to have a successful radon system, is to make sure the gaps and cracks are sealed. This is an example of a sealed floor wall joint between the floor and the concrete block walls. If this joint is not sealed in a permanent airtight fashion, and then we finish the basement and we bury this crack behind a wall, we are now going to cost a heck of a lot more energy to reduce the radon in this building. So if there's one thing that you take away from our presentation today is in new construction and in retrofit mitigation for that matter, the sealing is the most important piece. The floor wall joints are most important, but other openings too, like control joints, expansion joints, these all need to be sealed to make sure that we keep the conditioned air in the basement. Other penetrations through the slab also need to be sealed, and use proper materials as well. This plumbing knockout is already pulled away from insufficient sealing, so better materials will lead to better results. And you do want to use sealants, not adhesives. So adhesive caulking isn't what you want to use. You want to use an actual concrete sealant that will move and flex when the two materials are moving around. Adhesive is not meant to move. Adhesive is meant to stick forever. Sealants will move as the floor and walls crack open or move to. Then above, we've got simply roof flashing. The pipe is flashed above the roof, and then we have the electrical in the attic. So what's next? We simply add the fan during construction, which is probably not the best way to do it, or test for radon occupancy and then activate the system if necessary. I'm going to pause there and pass it over to our EPA colleague who has joined us. Tommy, if you want to take it.
Thank you, Josh. Sorry, everyone, for the technical difficulties, but here we are. So EPA estimates there are over 7 million existing homes in the U.S. that still need mitigation today. Building homes with radon-resistant features is one of the easiest, most effective ways to protect more people from radon exposure. Recently, we published the benefit cost analysis, and we estimate that new construction strategies, when you apply them to a sample of 2 million homes over 20 years in high radon areas, can avoid an estimated, it's a range, between 19,000 and over 48,000 excess lung cancer deaths, and have a net present value of in between $62 billion and $131 billion. This is an estimated return. If you want to put it per dollar, it's between $25 and $53 per dollar expended on radon reduction strategies. Important things to note when we did this estimation, these estimations assume that new homes are tested for radon after construction, that radon reducing features are installed in homes that test above EPA's action level, and that these radon reducing features cut the radon levels by 50% or half. We also estimate that more than 3 million homes have been built since 1990 using radon resistant techniques. So based on an annual survey of builders, which we buy every year, conducted by the Home Innovation Research Labs, and we've been doing that since 1990. And so considering that 1.5 million new homes are built each year, there's a tremendous potential to protect more people from radon-induced lung cancer. You can use common materials and straightforward techniques. New homes can be built to resist radon entry very simply. And that additional cost at the time of construction is minimal. And that's really important, as I'm sure Josh has mentioned. Radon-resistant new construction, RRNC, you hear that said a lot, typically cost a builder on the low end, $250, and on the high end, upwards of $750. Again, that comes from the annual builder survey. For a builder, it is much less expensive to install a radon-resistant system during construction than go back and fix a radon problem identified later. So if a new homeowner tests for radon and has to mitigate high levels, it could cost the builder or the owner more than the initial installation. Important to get that ahead of time. Some builders use the same construction techniques for better moisture control. So some builders might already be doing it. Excuse me. And then radon-resistant new construction, if that's the case, could cost less than $250 if the builder is already using some of those same techniques for moisture control. For guidance on standards, we have a webpage on building new homes with radon-reducing features. Please visit that webpage. It has all different kinds of voluntary consensus standards that we recommend people adhere to. Since about 2012, EPA has been actively participating in the radon industry-led ANSI-ARST voluntary consensus-based standards process. I'm actually missing a meeting right now to be on this webinar. I think a couple of others on this call are too. So yeah, it's a fun process. Homes certified or labeled can also have radon resistant techniques. The EPA's Indoor Air Plus program, of course, is one of those. NEHB, National Association of Home Builders, have a couple different programs. And then, of course, the USGBC LEED program has radon-resistant new construction techniques. And the last thing I want to leave you all with before I go, for the past decade, we've encouraged our state and tribal grantees to prioritize activities that promote building homes, building with radon-reducing features as recommended through congressional direction, and that is through our search program. And I will pass it off to Jane Malone.
Thank you, Tommy. And Josh, were you finished?
No, let me jump back in and get through
Yeah,
all
jump
that.
back in. Sorry about that. Thanks.
It's all right. Thanks, Tommy. And back where we left off with the components of our system here. If we're following step 2 here, test for radon after occupancy and the radon still elevated, it's actually very simple to activate the system. You simply add the fan in the attic, and we spec'd a low wattage fan, which doesn't cost a whole lot of electricity. And with the sealing techniques being done, it should not cost a whole lot of extra dollars to actually run the system to keep the conditioned air in the basement. In fact, it should be quiet enough too where the homeowner's not going to know it's actually running, but you do have a YouTube pressure gauge to show them that, in fact, there is pressure in the pipe, then the radon system is working. So one strategy that we did have is why activate passive systems during construction? And everything is cheaper when you do it upfront at the point of construction. So you'll have much lower radon levels to begin with. You'll address a false sense of security of the occupants. When the occupants see there's a passive radon system, they think, oh, gee, great, I'm safe. Well, that's not necessarily the case because we haven't tested to determine. There's also some decreased liability by builders, and it's cost effective to install the fan up front rather than later. The problem is, and I'll touch on this in a little bit, is what's the additional cost over the entire population if we do activate these systems from the start? In 2015, the Minnesota Department of Health conducted a radon-resistant new construction study with our new home population. We sent out surveys to the 13 fastest and biggest growing counties in our state, roughly 4 to 5 years after the inception of our radon-resistant new construction building codes. We wanted to get a sense on how these systems were performing as built systems by a variety of different builders in a variety of different locations. We did not visit these houses up front. We provided radon test kits for the homeowners to do their own testing, and then we just gathered the results in the follow-up. So as of time of publication, we tested over 800 homes, and of those 800 homes, only about 20% were elevated. Now, if you want to compare that to our existing data set of hundreds of thousands of homes throughout the state prior to the inception of our building code, we're seeing about 40% of existing homes over 4. So it appears that something that we've done in building code has greatly affected the radon in the new homes. Our average radon was about 2. Our average radon in the other larger existing data set is over 4. But we still had high elevated radon in some of these houses, and that's because attention wasn't paid in the detail of the construction. Fans were added, by the homeowner and then retested. So the carrot and the stick here was, we'll give you a free radon test kit, and if you're one of the first 100 people that respond with elevated radon, we will provide you with a free radon fan. And we provided over 100 fans, but at the time of publication, we tested 72 houses that were activated, and 70 of those came back well under 4. There were 2 homes that were struggling, however. We did visit those 2 homes, and what we found was that the ceiling detail that I talked about earlier was ignored. Once that detail was actually taken care of, then the radon went down dramatically. And as we saw, there's over a 94% radon reduction in this subset of our subset of houses. So we know that it works. So what do building code officials need to know? First, in areas where we're looking for code adoption, we may not be looking for them, as in the code officials, to take on more responsibility. Let the radon professionals handle that. Let the people that know radon handle that. But there's often most common mistakes made by builders. The overlooked details is the ceiling that at the cracks and joints isn't being done. If you can get that slab and wall sealed, that's the most important piece. In some cases, we don't have enough room in the attic for a radon fan. And that's because the existing PVC pipe is located too close to the edge of the roof for it to actually have space to get in and work. So we now require in Minnesota, and we've changed in the codes that Jane will talk about, an actual working space where you can put the fan in. Other failures, not so common, but they do happen, is the suction pit or the T-pipe under the floor gets plugged, either debris, garbage, or even concrete. So it's not actually connected to the gas permeable layer. And finally, we have little or no radon testing being conducted. We don't have a good data set of post-testing, specifically nationally. And that's a false sense of security for the owner and the occupant. So all new homes need to be tested. And we have addressed that in the national code that Jane is going to talk about now.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm really glad to be here today to participate in this exciting launch of a new effort where government to government communication, meaning state radon program staff, will begin to, or continue rather, I should say, not begin, but will in an organized way, hopefully, we'll see more and more contact with code officials from radon programs. You all, state radon program folks, are, as government employees, really key ambassadors for this message, because at the end of the day, the code officials have a lot of power in this system, are going to rely on your input, your opinions. The family of codes managed by International Code Council are all updated every 3 years. ICC manages the committees and the hearings. The final decision on all actions on the codes is made by voting ICC members, the code officials. And I would say that the open participation and stakeholder balance in their process is limited. They don't have, a full array of stakeholders participating in their committees, for example, and they're just different aspects of how they run that system. That differ from, for example, the ANSI-led stand process used for the NCR standards. With the International Code Council Appendix F, all code appendices are optional, and a proactive jurisdiction decision is needed to actually make an appendix available locally. Now, there's some exceptions to that, but generally speaking, our conversation about code adoption, the appendix adoption, is about getting a local or state agency or legislature to actually move that forward. Appendix F is called radon control methods. And this is one thing I wanted to stress today. We in the radon community refer to RNC, radon reducing new construction, or radon resistant new construction, RNC. That terminology is not used in the code world. I mean, some people obviously who are knowledgeable about radon have heard that term, but the name of the appendix is radon control methods. And so in the process of trying to educate code officials and other partners to advance adoptions, it's important to try to use that term, radon control methods. And as Josh said, these protocols from standards to you know what, I'm going to stop here, Josh. Why don't you put up my slides, and that way, because we're going to get to the maps in a minute. Thank you.
I've got them up.
Okay.
I've got them up. I'm trying to follow you.
Okay. So the evolution of the Appendix F is, you can see on the slide there. I won't read all that detail, but just to let you know that in the beginning, it was developed by code officials, EPA, and builders. It was unchanged until 2021 when the testing requirement was added. A minor change in 2024 code allowed for option for certain soils. There were 4 changes in 2020 that are going to take effect in the 2028 code. First of all, to delete the radon zone map in the county list. Secondly, to allow an option to follow ANSI RRNC, that standard, rather than the detailed protocol in the appendix. And also adding the cylindrical space in the attic to allow room for the fan. And finally, adding a requirement for horizontal pipe inserted on both sides of the T-fitting under the slab or in the crawl space. And in addition, the appendix has gone through name changes. They changed it to Appendix AF as of the 2021 code, and they changed it to BE, Appendix BE in the 2024 code. So that makes the conversation a little complicated because you're not, it's not one size fits all, depending on what code is already in action in a given jurisdiction. State legislature, there are 4 ways that states and localities can adopt. The pathway will vary. First of all, state legislature enacts model code as law. For example, 3 states created a mandate to develop the policy using a task force or another mechanism. Another way is for the legislation to empower state level appointed bodies or councils. And this is common. A number of states have some kind of, it could be called the building code administration body or the building code council, but it's a appointive body made up mostly of code officials and builders. And you can see in this detail how that played out in different states in terms of how Appendix F was adopted. Only 4 adopted as written, 4 or 5 states did it another way. Localities are authorized to adopt codes by state legislation. Some can vary from state version. Some may only adopt the state version. They're basically having a preemption under something called the Dillon rule, which does not allow localities to have something more protective or even different from the state. And in some states, localities are free to adopt without any approval whatsoever. So then the statewide radon appendix adoption considerations, legislation may be needed. And we all know that U.S. state staff can't be involved in that directly, but you will be invited to contribute information and opinions when it's appropriate. A legislative appointed body may have the power to decide, like the board of councils I just mentioned. But keep in mind that state employees may influence the decision making. State staff may have the power without a board. State regional building code officials associations may play a role, sometimes a big role. We know that these groups get together every 3 years to just vote as to what their state's position will be on different code changes at the international level. And they're certainly paying attention to what's going on in their state as well. If your state has adopted a statewide requirement already, focus on getting the latest version of the appendix adopted and encourage enforcement by local code officials, such as through inspections and requesting test results of less than 4. Next slide is going to focus on local radon appendix adoption, but I'm going to skip over this. It's sort of the same formula. There's different things you will do at the local level. Again, the code officials are extremely influential. And what I want to focus on now is the recent changes in the appendix, because these are news for all of us and also for the code officials. Many of you know already that the 2021 code added a testing requirement, and this slide details how that works. The first half test, when and how testing shall be performed. The second part of that slide shows results less than 4 shall be provided to the code official. That's a very powerful tool. If the appendix is in play in a jurisdiction that has adopted 2021 or newer, having that test result less than 4 is a very powerful tool to make sure these systems are working after they're built. Of course, having an independent test is important, better than having the build conduct the test. And if the test is above 4 or equal to 4, then they actually must go back and install the fan or otherwise modify the systems. Next slide. Also, the option to use ANSI RNC. And as Josh said, these protocols are fairly different. I mean, are mostly the same, but there are a few differences. One of the advantages of promoting a ANSI standard to builders is, you've got the benefits of it being developed through a consensus process consistent with ANSI. And also note that EPA recommends this along with the other ANSI standards. But there are some advantages. And then this other change was, and again, headed for 2028 version of the codes, deleting the radon map and list. This language steered code elected officials not to protect zones 2 and 3. EPA was the lead proponent in removing it because an appendix should advise how to do something, not where or where not to do it. No other appendix is place-based. And code elected officials are now free to adopt Appendix BE. Alternative data from CDC available in the radon report card for each state shows prevalence of radon test results above 4. So if you want to be advocating for this, you can. And then the summary here, these are the changes that have been made. And you can see by addition in the first column, code addition of the IRC, which improvements are in play. But I think this is a really important time for all of you to be looking at stepping up the advocacy on the appendix, the radon appendix, since these improvements have are finally coming to fruition. The next slide, and now I'm going to go into the detail on code adoptions around the country, and this we can skip. It's just, well, no, actually stay there for a second. Just the important thing about this slide, the darkest blue states have adopted the 2021 IRC. What that means is in those states, they're already set up to be able to adopt the appendix with the testing requirement. Next slide. And then this is a map that I've used for a long time, just showing what are the statewide radon control requirements by state. The flavors are different across you can see across the bottom legend. Bottom line is most of the states' shapes on this map are red because they have nothing adopted statewide. Next slide is the adoptions of one or more ICC codes. This is just background information. You can see that there are a few states on this slide that do not actually adopt the ICC codes at the state level. Next slide. This is the statewide radon appendix or other RNC adoptions. And this is a little confusing, but the orange states have nothing going on, right? The blue states, and this is like a much more diverse map than the one you saw a couple slides ago. There's a lot going on with some local adoptions in all those states that are colored blue. And then we have statewide adoptions in the green and brown states, similar to what you saw on a previous slide. But this is a big change, a big difference here. And I want to credit CRCPD leadership, Kim and Josh, for gathering this information. I think some others were involved too with the E25 committee to get some new information on what we have in the way of adoptions. And we hope that those of you who look at this will look at the information in the toolkit and submit updated information about your state if we don't have the right information here. I think that's my last slide, isn't it? Oh, no, right. So then this one highlights the states that have policy adoptions again, but it's highlighting those that have adopted AF or BE, because those states are the states, again, where the testing requirement is now in play. And those are the green, sorry, I've got several shades of green here. This map needs improvement, so we'll skip past that. Thank you. And one more thing, tribal resources on codes. We don't have, good collected information yet on tribe adoptions of codes, but I did want to note that the EPA has had this resource on its website for a while, and it's a way forward for tribes to be looking at where they want to put some building codes in play. And this link and links to almost everything else you've seen previously in these slides are available on the toolkit that Josh is going to talk about later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jane. I believe Mark is up next.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. All right. Now, should I share my own slide deck or does someone
Yeah,
have those slides here?
go ahead,
Okay.
Mark.
I don't have permissions right now. I use Jason's
You do now.
link to, okay, let's see. Well, my share is still blanked off. Your camera has been enabled. I can share my camera, but not my screen. So you can look at me, but that's not as entertaining.
Yeah, I've turned off everything I can find.
Okay.
Josh, do
It
you
might be
have the
because I was using
slides?
Jason's link and it's not his. I can do it without the slides. I only have 3 of Jason's slides. They are, informative. I can talk without them if nobody else has them. Sorry.
All right, we'll let you go ahead without them. Sorry about that.
No problem. I know I'm taking this over from Jason, who had another conflict because of meetings around the FIFA World Cup in Kansas City and stuff like that. So he couldn't get out of that, unfortunately. But I'll go ahead and start talking, and I can go ahead and come on camera so you at least have something to look at here.
Yeah, I got you, bud. I got you. Here's your slides. I'll get them up here in a second.
Oh, great. Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate that. Okay. So I'm kind of here to talk about an initiative that we in Kansas started up. I want to say it was probably around 2019, 2018. And I believe it was actually Kim who originally came up with the idea. But a little bit of background, we're a certification state. So we do certify, measurement mitigation technicians as well as laboratories. You may have noticed on Jane's map, Kansas was one of those states that has some adoption. So we do not have a statewide building code. Building code is adopted at the county and the city level typically. And so there are folks who have, adopted RRNC in some form or another. Most of the major metropolitan areas, either at the city or county level, have adopted it. So there is a decent amount of adoption. We're kind of always striving for more. We do inspect on a tip complaint basis. Typically we do, and we'll do some kind of random targeted inspections as well if we need to follow up on violations and things like that. And kind of as it developed, we said, well, for those who are in a regulatory environment or a regulator in a state, when we would talk to our mitigators, it would come up a lot how frustrated they would be when they had to go in and activate a system, an RRNC system. There'd be issues with it. Josh kind of went over some of those. A lot of time they couldn't work the fan in there, or they didn't like the way it was set up, didn't like the suction, didn't have pressure field extension in a way that they would want to. So what would end up happening is they just put in a whole new system, right? They don't activate the passive system. They just put in a whole new system if it turns out that that home is elevated. So that was one thing that we ran into a lot with RRNC. Being at the local level, we don't have authority over that. So we're kind of in that space where we want to help educate, but we can't exactly advocate, right? So we wanted to reach out to our local building code officials, to try and educate them somewhat on, RRNC, what it's doing, and then for those that don't have RRNC adopted, why it might be beneficial or why it's useful, right? So we started looking up these local officials, and sometimes it can be kind of hard to narrow down who it is, but we'll contact local officials either at the county or the city level when we have an inspection set up and invite them to go along with us on those inspections. You can go ahead and switch to the next slide here, Josh. And so, one of the things, we have a lot more success where RRNC is adopted than in places it's not, unless there's a code official who has a specific interest in that, right? So we'll reach out to one or multiple contacts that we can find and tell them we're coming to do an inspection. And if they have RRNC adopted, it seems like they're more likely to come along, right? So we'll invite them and they'll actually accompany us on an inspection. So we'll go in and show them, all the parts of the radon system. And I like to do a good explanation of kind of what it is accomplishing in terms of that subslab depressurization, because building code officials, it's not like they're not intelligent, but they don't necessarily have all this knowledge about radon, right? Or what a radon mitigation system is doing. And they, like most of the general public I've found, commonly have the conception that, oh, it's just pulling radon out and discharging out. They don't understand that pressure field extension and that, the way that it's actually the depressurization that it's actually performing, right? So just explaining those concepts and then kind of going over some of the issues that we see with, passive systems, or that our builders come back or our technicians come back and say, hey, these are the issues I'm seeing, so I don't even want to touch them. And it helps a lot with education, helps a lot with them being able to kind of take that back to their group, or even builders that, they know that are actively developing, and kind of liaison with them. We have tried outreach to builders and stuff like that, but typically you get a subcontractor putting these things in. And like I said, with the differences between the adoption at the local and state level, sometimes they can exempt certain things. They've adopted at different times, so it may look a little different in how they've adopted it. But those code officials have been pretty receptive. And we did get a little bit of a delay in this during COVID, because while we did do some inspections, we typically were doing skeleton crew inspections, not a lot of people going in there. You can go ahead to the next slide, Josh. Thank you. In areas where RNC is not adopted. So these are a little more challenging to get people to just want to come along on an inspection with you in general. But if they're interested, they will. We have had them join along, and they'll come, and we'll kind of explain to them, what the system is doing and why RRNC is beneficial. And that goes into like cost savings and just obviously the reduced health risks, right? How, if it's done correctly, then you're getting that risk reduction at a fraction of the cost, right? And so we've had a lot of success there, though I don't know, it'd be interesting. I don't know how much our outreach to the code officials has actually influenced code adoption thus far. I can't really say that, where we've gone to do inspections where RRNC is not adopted, they haven't really gone and adopted it right afterwards. So I don't know if it's gotten traction as far as, advocating for adoption, but it certainly seems like when they come along, we're informing them about something, right? And they actually are learning something out of that. So it's become sort of common practice for us to do this now, reaching out to those code officials, inviting them along. A couple caveats with that I will say is I always get the homeowner's permission to invite an outside authority in, right? You kind of never know what you're running into. So people, usually I'm thankful enough that they're letting me in the door, right, to inspect the radon mitigation system, because I don't think a lot of people are, most of the time, they're not receptive to those dear homeowner letters. So unless this is someone who's requested an inspection, it's kind of hit or miss whether or not they want extra people coming in, code officials coming in. Some people just kind of get a little squirrely, thinking they might find something else, or something shady's going on or something like that. So always check with your homeowners if this is something that you're going to start doing in the future. I'll have the inspection set up, and then I'll give them a call and say, hey, would you mind if I invited a local code official along, kind of explain about RRNC. Sometimes, the homeowner doesn't have any idea about building code and stuff like that as well. So it's a good idea to kind of get the permission of anyone involved. You don't want to show up with, more people than they anticipated, or some sort of a regulatory voice that is now in their home that they weren't expecting, right? So those are some of the, I guess, best best practices there. But I do recommend trying to find those code officials, even if you're not going to sort of invite them out. But, if you know that they might be interested in going on an inspection, or even just educating them on what radon reduction systems typically are trying to achieve, or how they're trying to achieve it, I think that can go a long way into just helping with the success of the passive systems. Are we holding for questions till the end here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll take them in the chat too,
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Yeah, no problem. I hope that covered everything. I don't know if Jason sent you like notes or anything, but I just got the slides and kind of winged it from there. So, but I've been heavily involved in the inspection process here. So.
All right, thank you, Mark. Philip, I believe you're up next.
All right, can you see this?
We can, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, hello everyone, my name is Philip Gibson. I'm the coordinator of the North Carolina Radon program, and I'm going to briefly walk you through our efforts to address radon in North Carolina building codes. Just to understand why we attempted to do this, and I say attempted because we didn't succeed. There were two main issues in North Carolina that I became aware of. One, from radon mitigators, certified mitigators, we found that there were a number of mitigations that were being installed incorrectly. That was one issue. The second one is we had worked with and continue to work with a third-party certification program for affordable housing. And that certification program included the requirement to have radon-resistant new construction. I respect, Jane, that that's not the language used, but nonetheless, it's what I use. But they agreed, and we worked with them to have RNC, or passive mitigation systems, installed in roughly 300 affordable houses that were built every year. In doing that, though, when they began implementing it, county building code officials were rejecting the inclusion of passive systems because there weren't any standards in the building codes to guide the building code official in reviewing or assessing those systems. So they were requiring an engineer's stamp on those plans, which was going to increase the cost of the affordable housing that was being built. So our goal then was to include radon mitigation standards, ARST, ANSI standards, into the North Carolina building codes, not to require mitigation to be conducted, but to guide mitigation systems as they were being installed. So over the past 10 years, we've seen some meaningful success in terms of getting radon included into state policies. For example, the North Carolina Cancer Control Plan and the State Health Improvement Plan have included radon in the policies of the state. In addition, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission recognizes currently, even today, and since 2017, I believe, that a radon level of 4 picocuries per liter or more, in fact, is a material fact. So what a material fact means is that licensed real estate brokers can face disciplinary action for failing to disclose radon levels at or above the threshold of 4 picocuries per liter. Testing is certainly voluntary. It's not a requirement. But if a test has been conducted and the radon level is known to be elevated, then everybody involved in a transaction, a real estate transaction, needs to be informed of that high level. So when it comes to building codes, it's important to understand that North Carolina is a Dillon's rule state, as Jane went over a moment ago. This is also regarded as a home rule state. What this means specifically is that local governments in North Carolina can only create building codes or ordinances when the North Carolina General Assembly allows it. The General Assembly does grant authority, though, to the North Carolina Building Code Council to establish building codes. So our efforts then were focused on requesting action from that council. Our overall approach has been and continues to be sort of a long-term strategy. I'm playing the long game, if you will. So this effort has started 10 years ago and started with getting radon formally included in the Cancer Control Plan, as well as other policies. From there, we built these partnerships and programs and resources, products that involved those partners in the total process. The Cancer Control Plan Advisory Committee includes a legislative subcommittee. And through that group, we requested letters of support for including radon mitigation standards in the building code. Importantly to note, our request was for voluntary guidance. Again, I'm restating that we wanted to have standards in the building codes that should a builder voluntarily decide to have a mitigation system in a home, that there would be guidance in the state policies for what that should contain. And the guidance specifically were the ANSI standards. So this was not a requirement to install mitigation systems. So we made a formal request. This was an in-person presentation to the Building Code Council, and that request was denied. We then hosted an online event featuring presentations from credible experts like Jane Malone, Kyle Poilman, Duke Cancer Institute Assistant Director, Steve Paterno, who was the chair of the advisory committee for the Cancer Control Plan, the director of the National Radon Program Services at the time, Bruce Sneed, and also the extension, the assistant director for North Carolina Cooperative Extension, Sarah Kirby, whose husband is also a major builder within North Carolina. So we revised our materials. Jane Malone was very instrumental in helping us with what we were requesting, what the standards should include, and the language proposals for the actual building codes. So we submitted all of this, the letters of support and so forth. I gave a second presentation, and that second request was denied. So all in all, though, we have regrouped and are not targeting building codes at this time, but rather earlier today, we held a 1-hour presentation, and we're currently focused on empowering local community health assessments with radon data and trying to come in that way to build more presence and support for another attempt at a later time for building codes. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Philip. Good to see you again, man.
Good to see you.
All right. I'm going to wrap up the state subpart here with what Minnesota has done. And what we've done is partnering for better radon risk reduction. And our partnerships kind of go twofold. One is with the state code officials and my counterpart at the Department of Labor and Industry, whom you hear from here in a few minutes. But we sit on their rule committee and participate in their rulemaking processes when it comes to health-related issues. It might not just be radon, it may be mold or other indoor air quality related issues like lead and asbestos. The health department will put a seat on that advisory committee and to basic, if nothing else, be an advocate for other healthy homes type of programs. We also have an education coordination of our education efforts, where my colleagues may invite me to come to their annual code official trainings that are like a week long, held in the Twin Cities here, and I'll go do a radon piece for 90 minutes, a half hour, an hour, whatever it might be. And we have a 2-hour continuing education approved for code officials, builders, and plumbers. At the local level, we also do something similar that Kansas does, in that we coordinate with the local code officials if we have a mitigation inspection, not so much to bring them with us, but to make them aware of something we may find that might be against building code. For instance, if we're drilling through structural members like a joist or notching joists or I-beams, whatever it might be, if the radon contractor makes a mistake and alters a structural member without getting a building permit, that's a problem that we bring to the local code officials. We also do local code official training, just at their chapter meetings, if you will, meeting them on site. We've even sat down with just one city code official team and just gone through what the radon requirements are. what the state health department will handle, and what the state building folks should be handling. And the state in Minnesota, the state building code addresses radon control in homes prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued. If that certificate has been issued, then the jurisdiction falls to the health department because it's now a radon mitigation system. And what I want to do for the next few minutes is just share with you some of the training materials that we have. These training materials are available to you folks as well, and they can be tailored to it. So everything that I talked about earlier, we discuss at length. And then we'll actually bring them through a case study. This is the new modern built home, built with radon resistant features with the new energy code. And we talk about the building science and the aspects of what you're actually inspecting. Like, as a code official, do you understand that there's intakes and exhausts and the importance of them working properly? On the left here, you have an heat recovery ventilator or an air-to-air exchanger. This is a very clean air intake, and they need to be clean. If they're not, that causes a problem with pressurization and depressurization, more specifically, in the lower levels of the house. We make sure that we talk about fresh combustion air, whether or not the home needs it. As for their combustion appliances, it does need it to breathe because these buildings run negative. Also, a way to put that is these houses suck. You have an air exchanger, but what the heck is it? What does it do? Do the occupants know how to operate it, and more importantly, how to maintain it? If you don't maintain these air-to-air exchangers, regardless of what climate you're in or where you're located, if you don't maintain these, they will cause radon problems because they will cause the building to suck more air in than air they blow out. On the right-hand picture, if you zoom in, and I will here in a couple slides, this is the maintenance schedule for this appliance. It's rarely followed. It says these filters need to be cleaned or changed quarterly. Many of them, when we see inspections, they haven't been changed at all in years. There's a core, an energy-related transfer core. It doesn't mix the air in that box, but it allows for the energy, the heat and the cooled air to temper each other. This core needs to be cleaned at least annually, sometimes twice a year, depending upon the manufacturer. It's rarely done. Here's the maintenance schedule. Change your filters quarterly, address the core annually, and the intake on the side of the building, which is probably the most important part of this entire air-to-air exchanger system. It says clean is necessary. Well, what is that? How are they going to know? So making homeowners aware that they have to maintain this thing is of utmost importance. What I tell people when I do my training is anytime you have to shovel your snow or anytime you mow your lawn, go double check that your air intakes are clean. A couple other things, the effects of an air exchanger. Well, does it affect radon levels? Maybe sometimes, and it depends. If it is balanced or positively pressurized, you'll get a slight amount of dilution. But if it's not, if it's unbalanced and unmaintained, it actually sends the basement into a harder suction scenario, and that can actually cause a radon problem in the building. So we go through an actual house or two. Is radon resistant new construction working here? Well, we want this magic number to be below 4, ideally below 1. It's well above 4 a lot of the time, so in this case, we activate it. We make sure that the suction point is sealed and the caps and cracks everywhere are sealed. We understand that there are other appliances in the home that compete with our radon system to make sure it's more effective. We have to overcome the use of the dryer because that uses indoor air for combustion and exhausts it outside. Bath fans and kitchen exhaust hoods do the same thing. They're taking indoor air and they're blowing it outside. Where's that makeup air coming from? It's coming from controlled openings in the building shell, but also sometimes it's coming from the soil, and that's where we get radon problems. Even the best sealed basements can still have radon problems, and that's an example here, where this is a weekend over Thanksgiving, where they're cooking, we're bathing a lot. People, they've got more, in this particular situation, it was over Thanksgiving where you've got guests. So you're running exhaust fans more often for showers and bath use. You've got the kitchen exhaust hood going crazy. This was a perfectly sealed basement until Thanksgiving happened and the radon levels started to trick up. So in this case, the system was activated with the fan and then the U2 manometer, and the post mitigation levels became low again. So just an abbreviated piece of one case study that we go through. And I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Don Savini at the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry to discuss a code official's perspective on things. Don?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Don Savini. I work with the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. I've been here 26 years. I started out as the state's energy specialist and talking about sealing up buildings and air quality in buildings. And when we have an adage that says build them tight and ventilate them right. That happens a lot, and Josh just covered a lot of that with the fact that radon systems can create additional suction if they're not ventilation systems can create additional suction on basements if they're not maintained. I tell, and I've done hundreds of hours of training to builders, code officials, homeowners at the community college level who take classes and things, and I tell them about maintenance. But as a builder myself, I used to wait 2 weeks before I would go meet with the homeowner and show them how their building works, because the walkthrough day of closing is a very poor time to do that. They're thinking about, do they have enough money to cover the extras? Did the points change? Did the interest change? They don't listen to what you tell them. Making an appointment 2 weeks later is a really good way to do that and show them. I've opened up. I'm the guy they send out to take these buildings apart when they have moisture problems, and I've opened up buildings and I've opened up mechanical systems, and I've opened up heat recovery ventilators, energy recovery ventilators, and they swore they've changed the filters, but the directions are leaning against the filter on the inside still. So there's a lot of things that really play really closely with energy codes and sealing and sealing the building up so we're not sucking air out of the building or cold air coming into the building, but we need to seal things up for the radon systems. Josh did a really good job of showing the crawl spaces. I mean, we don't have crawl spaces that are vented to the outside in Minnesota very pretty much. If they are, they're basically just a short basement and conditioned space. We require a supply and a return in those half the diagonal distance away to ventilate that area and get air movement. But we also, like Josh showed, require all the sealing and everything like that. Minnesota's radon resistant construction for new residential buildings became into the code in 2009 based on legislation that was written in 2007, 2008 here in Minnesota. Now, we do have a statewide code. I think everybody should have a statewide code, but that's up to each city and each state and each jurisdiction within that state. Colorado, I think, has moved to a statewide energy code. That's the first step in getting a statewide enforced code. People who build buildings, people who inspect buildings, plumbers, electricians, they're all licensed by the state. So they have something to lose if they don't follow the codes. And we don't, we prefer to get compliance through education. One of the 6 units here that I supervise is the education unit, and I'm very active in that as well as going out and doing this training because we need to get, compliance through education. It's a lot easier than through enforcement. And if we can keep doing that, I myself have probably taught 150, 200 classes on just radon in the past 10 years to thousands of individuals. And most of them don't realize how simple it is to do it right during construction. We're training the building officials to do that. We have a disclosure act similar to I heard other speakers talk about, where that it requires the seller to disclose if a radon test has ever been performed on the home. And so if the homeowner gets a test kit and sends it in and the laboratory sends back those test results, the homeowner knows about that. It's a recorded document. They need to tell us that. Josh mentioned the licensing that we have with health. Radon mitigators for mitigation and measurement now have to be licensed with the Department of Health. That's a really good thing. We are currently going through an update in our codes. We're going to be adopting the 2024 code. If you've gone to the hearings, you've probably seen me at the microphone talking about radon and other things in the building codes. We're there very active at all the time doing that. Some of the key components for our code is that it applies to new detached 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses is what the main focus is. But when you look at the statute says residential new construction. So I've even taken apartment buildings with maybe a parking garage under all of it or part of it and broken that down and walked through this and said, okay, we have residential units that are in contact with the earth. How are we going to mitigate radon for them? And what about those units above the garage? We typically have an occupancy separation in building code between the garage and the residential space, so that helps a lot. But what about those areas that are still in contact with the earth? And is anybody doing a radon mitigation there? And so we've kind of expanded that because the statute says all residential, and those are residential by nature. And so we've pushed that a little bit further out, but the focus has been on 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhomes, and we've done a lot of work with them. As Josh said, we require all those things that are in the appendix chapter with the gas permeable layer, the vent piping, sealing of all the concrete slabs, and then we even tell them in our training to, if you've got an interior footing where that 2x6 or 2x4 wall is sitting on top of that footing, make sure you seal that concrete around that penetration through the slab as well. Any water lines that may be coming through, sewer lines that may be coming through the slab, the toilet flange for the basement or the lowest level concrete slab where you're having a toilet in the future or something, all those penetrations need to be sealed. We just make that as part of our inspection. We do require additions for homes that already have a radon system installed, whether it be passive or active. The addition going on also has to have a radon provisions for that. And if they tie it into the existing, they can do that. Most of the time they put a separate vent up and vent it that way. There's some other benefits to this that people don't realize, and we have, because we have a lot of basements in Minnesota, and when you have, insulation and things and block and things like that, and poured foundations get cold, they conduct air or cold temperatures, I should say, to the inside face. And if you don't seal that penetration along that wall floor assembly, what happens is all this warm, moist air gets sucked up in there, and it actually creates moisture load issues. The vapor that comes up from there, which is one of the things in the soil, besides radon, it's in its gaseous form. The water in its gaseous is vapor. It hits a cold surface, and if it goes to a phase change, and it turns to liquid. And if it keeps staying cold, it eventually go through another phase change and turn to ice. The challenge is that when it gets to the liquid, with all the lignocellulosic material that is there to feed the water and the mold, it gets really to be into some really poor quality air and deadly molds that are there. Other things that are in the soil that we have, because it's a lot of farm ground, pesticides, herbicides, methane is another one that's in the ground a lot of times. So we address these things in our trainings all the time, and Josh does a great job working with us to do that. I'm fortunate to get involved in this and get to know Josh as a coworker and a friend, and together we both have been talking from both agencies to get this done. Some changes we're making for our 2026 code that will come out, adopting the 2024 by reference, labeling the soil gas membrane on these areas that or have crawl spaces where there's no concrete, so that people realize don't just go tear holes in this and things like that. We're going to allow a 90-degree elbow with 20 feet of pipe in one direction, and if they can't get the T-fitting with 10 feet of pipe in each direction. We're going to require sump baskets where the drain tile system is used as a collection system to have a sealed cover, and they have to label it sump and radon gas venting. Where gas and vent pipes are accessible in the attic, they have to follow the provisions of the mechanical code. So here's where we're bringing in another code, the mechanical code section 306.3, which addresses appliances in attics requires, at a minimum, a catwalk and a service platform over to it, so that you can actually service that fan. And you have to build a catwalk through the attic. Most builders don't want to do that. We did add an exception to that section of the code that says the radon gas pipe vent could be installed in such a manner that a future fan installation does not require access into the attic. So essentially, it requires them then to get that vent pipe in the attic out at the attic access alongside of it, because we don't want them going up in the attic. And if they go in the attic, they have to have that catwalk and that service platform. The problem with that is they stomp down all the insulation. They break the trusses. Let's face it, trusses are not 2x4s anymore. They're 2x3s, and they break those. And then they step on wires, and it's a fire hazard as well, because they break the wires and they got the wires against the metal gusset of the plate, and that's just a problem. So we said, look, either put the catwalk in or put that fan in the center of the building where you have your attic access that requires 30 inches above it already, so that we have room to service it from a ladder without going into the attic, and we got plenty of room to get everything we need there.
Hi, Don. We've got just less than 15 minutes to wrap up, and we
Okay.
still need to cover the resources.
All
Okay,
right, thanks,
will-
John.
One other thing I want to add is we are
Go
going to
ahead.
require testing before they can get a certificate of occupancy, which we know is going to create some challenges if the moving truck is in the driveway. Code officials are looking to possibly issue a temporary certificate of occupancy to give people, because they've already closed on their previous home, to get them in. And my response to them is, then you need to put on that a timeline that this needs to be completed by, so that it's not just going to be never ending. You got to put an end date to that temporary CFO. I do a lot of this training. Be happy to share my training materials with you all and everything like that as well.
All right, thanks, Don. I'm sure there'll be another question follow up once I'm done with my portion here to wrap things up. All right, so next steps with radon control adoptions is we're going to have, we do have information posted on radonleaders.org, and I'll share that. The web portal is right there. We got a toolkit for this webinar specifically, which will have other information added to it as well. So please let us know, and when I say us, I mean CRCPD as well as the Indoor Environment Association. If you learn about additional adoptions of radon appendix in the IRC, let us know so we can update the information that we have on the website. And as I said, resources will be added to this portal, and to walk you through it a little bit. And this will get changed up a little bit, but we do have the downloadable Excel spreadsheets that Jane had used. We have got talking points created. Jane, thanks for putting a lot of that all together, as well as links to references not only in that we've made today, but other useful information that's out there. And again, this will be added to this webinar is recorded, and it'll also get posted on this website. Here's a screenshot of the adoption by state. And we do have some notes, which, like, for instance, Colorado has a whole lot of locales that have adopted the Appendix F, and then what years we have. And Jane asked that you send any updates to national policy at arts.org, so we can keep that as updated as possible. The other resources we have are talking points for today's webinar if you're going to meet with your code officials. We don't need to get in the nitty gritty on our talking points about radon. I assume most of you can handle that, but if you do need assistance putting them together, please reach out. But it talks about building homes with radon control is easy, very easy, and it's much less expensive up front. The components of it all, the costs of it all, as you can see, there's talking points that are pre-developed for you. And you can kind of a la carte use what you want. You don't have to use it all. Also links to the ARTS report card, as well as a code inspection opportunity and checklist that's housed in one of the national standards that we work on. Here's references from the webinar, the EPA cost benefit and standards of practice that Tommy mentioned. We have the ICC Appendix BE of the National Code, as well as a testing requirement language. And moving down, we have the indoor environments report card. This is good, really great information, and every state has their own report card. And then on the bottom, I included our website for information on radon-resistant new construction and a link directly to that study that I referenced earlier as for our RNC effectiveness study from 2015. So make a plan to reach out to your code officials in your state or in your tribal jurisdiction and alert them how to make radon control in new homes more effective. And there's really 5 pieces to this. Adopting the appendix if it's not already adopted. Requiring a post-construction radon test that's below 4. And we've stepping away from the zone 1 only approach where we're only going to try this in local jurisdictions that have a zone 1 affiliation with EPA. That approach is going away, thankfully. And allowing the RNC standard from the Standards Consortium as an alternative pathway to get to the risk reduction we're looking for, and use a checklist to inspect systems during system construction. Please let us know at E25, CRCPD, and IEA how it goes and other ways we can help. We've got training materials. Don alluded to it. Jane alluded to it. I have some as well. And we have a ton of experience that you can pull from to aid anything from creating your speaker notes to meeting notes or even meeting preparation, depending upon who you're going to be talking to. If that's lobbyists, if that's a builder, a code official, whoever it is, we can put information in front of you that could be very, very useful. And for more information, here's my contact info. Sorry, I don't have everyone else's contact info that was a part of this really group effort. And this is just like step 1 of a longer process of what we want to get to. We want to get code adoptions throughout the country. We also want to train people throughout the country, and that includes code officials. So that's really our next step, is putting together a nationwide approved code official training that probably going to be on demand online, but trying to get the logistics of that figured out. And so we're a couple minutes ahead of or behind schedule, but we have time for questions and answers. I do have one question that I want to ask Don to touch on, and that is, Don, we've got 60-some people on this, and a lot of them are looking for insight on how best to, as a radon program, how best do those individuals approach their code officials, either their state counterparts or local counterparts? How can they best approach those code officials and get the ball rolling to get the code officials educated, but maybe more importantly, at least not to turn the code officials off from what this radon thing is? Because in some jurisdictions, this radon word is a 4-letter word. So any insight into that, man?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, go at it and just and show them how simple it is, to do this during the construction of a building. And many have talked about the fact that it's so much more cost effective and everything. What we're doing for radon reduction is very similar to what they're already experiencing for sealing up buildings for energy code and other things. And so it's just a matter of extending it to the envelope that they're not used to extending it to. Most code officials, once we've taught them this, have said, oh, okay, that isn't bad. Our builders might fight us on this. I said, well, our response is, that's your job. You become the educator in the field then, and we have it in the code, and so they have to do it, and you have to inspect for it. And so, but it isn't that hard to do. It doesn't take the building official any more time to look at it when he's going or she's going through the building. They're afraid it's more workload they're going to add to them and things like that. It's just about communication. Positive communication about the systems, positive communication about how they make healthier environments and how the homeowners will be healthier. And, like I said, we're seeing it put in a lot of commercial buildings too now, but just because people are spending a lot of time at work.
Additional piece I would throw in there is, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Coming from a guy who spent 10 years of my life fighting the state building lobbyists and getting my teeth kicked in, just educating them and making them a partner in radon risk reduction, not an opponent. Once I got that in my head, that I'm not fighting the building lobby, I'm educating them. then they came around a lot easier. And I think we're finding that to be the case too nationally, is that we don't need to be fighting with these people. We want to inform them so they can make better decisions. As there's been a couple of questions in the chat. One question from Patricia is any direction for multifamily? And the direction here, the principle is the same for multifamily buildings. However, there's additional information in the R standards, ANSI RCC 1000 as one place to go. And we do have a link in the resources for this webinar to get to those standards, but radonstandards.us will get you there. Ms. Malone, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I wanted to say that we've been talking quietly, but maybe it doesn't need to be so quiet, about the fact that since we've made these inroads with Appendix F, which affects, as you know, 1 and 2 family dwellings, we'd like to reopen the idea of protection for multifamily buildings in the next round of code changes. And that would take the form of trying again to get an appendix added to the IBC, and it would consist entirely of NCR CC 1000. There wouldn't be any reason to write new code language when we've already got a good standard, now that we have the precedent set of having NCR RNC in the code. So look for that in the days ahead, and welcome anybody who wants to help with that. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Don, you got your hand up?
Yeah, just to add to that, if we want to make a difference at the national codes and get these in there and get people to start enforcing them, I think we need to reach out to the National Association of Home Builders. They have a very big influence at the national code hearings. They have 4 people who sit on the committee.
No.
And vote on the proposals. And so maybe some education there to get them a little bit more on board might help.
All right, thanks, Don. Thanks, Jane. I don't see any other questions in the chat at this time. If you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We've got a couple more minutes. We can go through and answer these. All right, not seeing any. I appreciate everybody's time today. I hope you learned something, and keep your eyes out on the resource portal. And please keep us abreast of any activity that's happening in your local jurisdiction. Anyone else have any final parting comments?
Just going to add, everyone, we appreciate your attendance and your patience today. And remember that together we are stronger. When you share ideas and best practices, you remember that you have an impact on each and every encounter that you have. So work hard to make it a positive one, and you will make strides in your community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Nice work. Talk to you soon.